welcome to our special bonus section on reflections of remote work during COVID-19, success stories and lessons learned from Maryland businesses. This webinar is made possible by the Maryland Department of Transportation's Commuter Choice Maryland program. My name is Gladys Hurwitz, and I'm the Multimodal Transportation Specialist at the Maryland Department of Transportation, and will be the moderator for this webinar. Shana Johnson, Vice President and Project Manager at Foursquare ITP, and also the Transportation Demand Management and Parking Practice Lead at Foursquare, was also joining us. Hi, Shana.
Hi, Gladys.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Just a reminder to everybody, this session is being recorded. So for today's agenda, we're going to highlight and reflect on our May webinar series that we had. Shana will share information regarding telework best practices at Foursquare. We'll also discuss and reflect on our post-COVID-19 commuting impacts. And there will also be some reflection on where do we go from here moving forward. So for the first time in our nation's history, we're facing a pandemic that has forced many organizations and businesses to quickly plan for working remotely or to adjust their existing remote work plans and policies to accommodate for remote work full-time. These webinars were put together to provide you with the support that you need during these difficult times. You can also learn from business leaders on best practices and provide you with inspiration for your workplace or business to put in motion. And we also wanted to provide you with information and resources available to help you quickly adjust and prepare for what the future may bring. So each week in May, we featured a Maryland business leader who touched on various themes relating to telework. In the following slides, we'll provide main takeaways from each session. So our first session was with Odessa Phillips, and she is the president and CEO from Aceto Consulting LLC, and she shared her experience with remote work during the pandemic. It was inspirational to hear about the importance of having a collaborative company culture because it certainly helped them pivot quickly to meet the demand of their business. Keeping up with the remote company culture with morning coffee, she shared that there were morning coffee check-ins and virtual happy hours, and really building in that fun time was important to her to ensure that her employees sustained really good morale. During our poll opportunity, the majority of viewers also shared that they did not have a lot of company-sponsored fun time, or believe the percentages were quite low. So it's important to remember to try to build that in to your company culture, especially now more than ever. So taking breaks, it wasn't stressed enough how important it is that many of your viewers and many of us who are working from home make sure that we take the breaks. And I believe during a poll that we have then also showed that many people are taking them, which is great. And then she ended with some really great remote work tips, such as the importance of establishing consistent protocols, using technology effectively to meet the needs of your customers and employees, and the importance of regular communication and breaks. So one of the questions that we had during that session was, how many days a week did our viewers remote work before COVID-19? And the majority of folks were either in the as needed basis or not really applicable to them, or some folks even shared that they at least did it 1 day per week. So as I mentioned earlier, this is that poll that went into detail about company-sponsored fun time. Notice 77% said no. We were disappointed to hear that. Hopefully that changes for you. You know, it's really important to try to do that to improve employee morale, especially. So for our second session, week 2, we had Miss Bonnie Grassi, the Director of Human Resources at the Retina Group of Washington, an ophthalmology medical practice, and share her experience with shifting the paradigm to remote work. So many viewers appreciated hearing Bonnie's story because many of them can relate to not having remote work be widely used pre-COVID, to having to scramble quickly to meet the needs of their business to respond to the stay-at-home orders during the pandemic. So Bonnie really stressed the importance of having a telework policy and an agreement in place, also the importance of ensuring that technology requirements and how to evaluate staff in a remote work environment should always be taken into consideration. Planning was also very important to this whole process, and they are still evaluating where they're going to go with remote work post COVID-19, which I'm sure many businesses are probably starting to think about now. We also had a poll question. Continued support for some telework post COVID-19 is high. Would you want to telework every day? So it looks like the majority of folks said that a couple days a week would be great at 74%. And I think that a lot of businesses and employees are seeing now where they're remote working full time, that it's possible to do remote work more than one day a week, especially if your business has certain policies in place to help make all of that possible. So another question that we had was, does your workplace plan on providing the option for remote work post COVID-19? And 53% of folks shared yes. That option most likely would be available. 41% were unsure or just doubtful at this time, because I guess they're just seeing how everything goes and we'll adjust it then. And then 6% said no, which I thought was pretty interesting. But it's probably the same 6% or the 6% of those folks who, for whatever reason, maybe their job does not permit or accommodate for remote work, or they just didn't provide it as an option pre-COVID-19. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll get some inspiration after watching some of our sessions. Then for webinar 3, we had Nicholas Rampos, the Director of Transportation Operations and Programs at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. So what we did is we pivoted a bit with Nick, and we had him come in and provide a regional perspective on remote work during and post COVID-19. And what he shared was, based on the 2019 State of the Commute Survey, was that telework actually had nearly tripled from 2004 to 35% of all regional commuters were actually teleworking occasionally. So that was pretty interesting. It will also be interesting to see where that percentage takes us post COVID-19 through 2020 and 2021. Nearly 59% of workers shared that they did so in terms of telework at least one day per week. Nick also anticipated, he gave us a little bit of insight during our Q&A, that post-COVID-19, he expects more businesses in our region will embrace teleworking more if they have not already done so in the past, especially if productivity levels are where they need to be, which totally makes a lot of sense. So he also shared that they will be creating a work group to develop guidelines and recommendations to commuters in the region moving forward. And I thought that was a really great segue into all the different tools that his program actually offers. So one of the poll questions that we asked during his session was, before COVID-19, did your office have a telework arrangement in place? And 63% of our participants actually said that they did have a formal telework program in place. So that was good to see that. And about, I believe it's 21% said that they did not have one in place. So hopefully their offices are thinking about that moving forward or are currently working on one. So that's a really great one. So for our 4th session, Ms. Peggy Yusko, the Director of Benefits and Wellness at AOPA, shared information and provided insight on their work-life balance program. So for numerous years, AOPA has been recognized for what they have accomplished with their program. They've received so many awards. It's pretty amazing. It was interesting to see and to hear about how they were able to identify individuals best suited for remote work and how they address many of the challenges by maintaining a strong communication and having regular meetings during remote work. And they also stress that the business case for having their program just really made sense. They've seen a lot of improvements with their employees' productivity, or they've maintained productivity, for example, and just overall the business sense just really showed that the program made the most sense and showed a lot of benefits for it. So they're going to continue with it, which is great to hear. So some key takeaways from the webinar series. What we saw was, prior to COVID-19, telework was becoming more prevalent for a lot of our businesses that we heard from. Employees do want a work-life balance, right? Or are thinking about it. And Shana and I were actually just talking about this earlier, the importance of work-life balance when deciding where you want to work. And also deciding on whether you want to stay at a place for a long period of time. And it's also interesting to see that many employers did not offer the option of remote work, or they offered it on a limited basis. During COVID-19, I would say some key takeaways would be the importance of sustaining employee morale, which is really important, which is something that we heard from Odessa's session. The importance of establishing or revising a working remote protocol is necessary. That's something that we've heard echoed for the majority of the sessions that we've had. And that many employers are realizing during this time that productivity remains high with remote work, and that it is possible. And it's also really important to create that remote work life culture. So just to piggyback again on the whole employee morale, it's important that employees know that they have support, and that working remote can also be fun, because it can also become stressful, I think, for a lot of people. So it's really important to try to build in some of that fun time, some of that work-life culture. And then post-COVID-19, many organizations are now starting to evaluate where they're going to go with remote work, whether they need to make any changes to their policy or update their policies to support remote work more. And they're also trying to see what other support they could use to help them improve a lot of the programs, or maybe think about developing new programs to support a work-life balance, or remote work, or just something for commuter benefits overall. So with that, let's see. This slide right here just shows that all of our Lunch and Learn May webinar series that I just shared are available on our website. So feel free to go check it out. They're all available via YouTube, and just thank you. So I'll turn it over to Shana.
Thank you, Gladys.
You're welcome.
Excuse me. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about starting off with a peek into our telework practices at the company where I work, Foursquare Integrated Transportation Planning. And we were founded in 2006 with one employee. I was actually the first employee after the founder, and have been working personally with the company since 2008. So that's my own individual claim to fame. But today we have more than 40 transportation planners, GIS experts, a data science team, and a whole host of very talented staff spread across 3 offices. Our headquarters is here in Maryland in Rockville, which is where most of the people are, but we do have 2 small offices in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and in Boston, Massachusetts. We've done work in 18 states and the Washington DC, and the District of Columbia. And our workforce is pretty young. So we have a lot of people who are with the company who have young children, and that has certainly influenced our experience during this time of COVID-19. Much of our workforce in Rockville actually lives in the District of Columbia and reverse commutes out to our headquarters in Rockville. We do a very wide variety of things. We're known for transit service planning and operations, for helping transit agencies plan for transit facilities and multimodal access. We've done a number of regional plans, and such as regional transit vision plans and other types of regional planning and statewide planning, helping to evaluate services on individual corridors. And as Gladys mentioned, I lead our TDM shared mobility and parking practice. We've done a lot of work in bike share and some bicycle and pedestrian planning, and work with a variety of transportation agencies on strategic and financial management. So going into the COVID-19 time, our telework policy was already that employees could telework up to 2 days a week. However, if you spent, say, a day out of the office for a meeting at a client site or other reasons, those would count towards your 2 telework days. So ideally, we liked for everyone to be in the office 3 days a week. We encouraged employees to have schedules that were consistent. So Monday would be your telework day, and that day would be marked on your calendar. But of course, if you're taking a client meeting, we did have flexibility. We've always had flexibility. So if you had a client meeting on a different day, then that wasn't a telework day for you typically, you could certainly move that, and we just ask folks to indicate that on their calendars. We also provide a lot of flexibility. So a lot of our staff, if they have personal appointments that may take them out of the office, they may do that on their telework day, and then be able to make up that time at other times during the week that they took out, rather than making them take PTO. We also have requirements around location. So telework has to be conducted from a fixed location with internet, like a home office. We don't want people to count the time that they're maybe kind of on an Amtrak that has a spotty internet, or in an airport in transit, as telework. We do provide employees with a monitor, external keyboard, and mouse for the home office. And our policy is that during work hours, whether you're in the office or teleworking, everybody has to be accessible by email, phone, and through Microsoft Teams. And we utilize Teams to indicate when we are actually available for communication. In terms of COVID-19 specifically, we didn't have a lot of the same challenges as other companies because we were all already fully set up, and telework was a part of our culture. We could go right to that and without any hiccups. However, we did, certainly experience other types of challenges, particularly as I mentioned, we have many people in our company who have young children. And so the fact that we had school and childcare closures impacts employees' schedules. So what we've done is, folks who need to take time off during the day for helping to take care of children, for example, can make that time up at another time during the week, and not worry about that. Which is also mentioned on the slide in the middle, the flexibility. We'll always can make up time outside of typical work hours and be flexible around the schedule. We just indicated on our calendars when we're unavailable. There's also the option to take paid leave. So anyone who's unable to telework or work a full 40 hours a week due to childcare responsibilities or other family care responsibilities, they are eligible to take employee paid leave under the FCRA Act, which I believe that's what it's called. So we have had employees who have taken FCRA, and we support them in their ability to do that completely fully. And we also take care of our workload management. We have a very robust practice where we examine every single week with all of our managers' assignments in the upcoming week for all of our staff, so that we can make sure that if we anticipate issues with anyone having too much work in the following week, that we can mitigate those before they occur. And we definitely are adherents, as I know many of you at your companies probably are too, to this famous quote by Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and intentionally creating a culture that supports our employees and engenders a high quality of work is core to who we are. And part of that is, we have 4 core values that have long been established at our company. And in more recent years, we've come up with a system for peer recognition of demonstrating commitment to the core values. So when we're in the office, we actually have a big chalkboard that talks about the core value. We feature one every month. And there's actually these little, what you see on the screen, those are actually physical stickers that we can get and give to folks when they're that we want to recognize for demonstrating a core value. But since it's during this time of remote work, we don't have those actual physical stickers anymore. Our HR team created gifts that we can send to each other virtually through Microsoft Teams. And it's the same as the stickers. We use them to recognize our employees who have demonstrated a core value, and we send the virtual badge along with a sentence or two explaining why we're giving them a badge, and we also record that for our own benefit as well, collectively as a company. Similar to how Gladys touched on the practices for encouraging fun at the Aceto group in our webinar number 1, Foursquare, we also do a lot to promote company culture. We have weekly virtual game nights as well as a weekly virtual happy hour in which we incorporate some kind of skill share. This week, the skill share was actually on trying to be better at video conferencing and lighting, and one of our staff members who has a background in video and audio production gave us some pointers. Next week, it's going to be on Zumba, so I'm looking forward to one of our colleagues who's also a Zumba instructor teaching us some Zumba. We also do virtual lunch and learns, which are during the day, which many times focus on some kind of specific skill that's directly related to our work and our profession. We also incorporate some lunch and learns that are sort of more wellness oriented, such as managing stress. We've also had fun lunch and learns about things like learning how to do crossword puzzles. So we also have a staff member who writes crossword puzzles. So there's some fun stuff in there too. And all of our senior management have one-on-one coffee breaks with everyone in the company has an opportunity, and we schedule them so that they'll have some one-on-one time with someone in senior management. So shifting gears a little bit, from our company's individual experience, what it's been like during this time and how we've managed, we're all starting to talk more and more now about reopening and what is that going to look like from a transportation perspective. And of course, as a transportation planner, this is a topic that is front of my mind every day. And to some extent, some of this is still unknown, but there are some hints of at least what we predict will happen, some consensus around those. And one of those is that we expect the use of public transit will be down. Some of that is, of course, going to be due to the fact that the capacity on our vehicles is going to be limited. We're not going to want to carry vehicles with a crush load of passengers anymore. We're going to want to make sure that people can maintain social distancing. So that means we're just going to be able to carry fewer people. We also expect that many people are still not going to feel safe riding public transit. They may feel that they will be exposed, more likely to be exposed to the virus while riding public transit. And so we don't expect that public transit services will return to their full capacity and past ridership for quite some time. Corollary to that is, unfortunately, from the perspective of congestion and the user experience, as well as our air quality, is that we do expect car use will be up. And while there's been a lot of hope that during this time when people haven't been commuting, that they'll be less likely to want to return to the daily traffic jam, I think that those concerns may be outweighed by the desire to insulate oneself on the commute, which certainly, you may have been a former transit rider, now you feel unsafe. Riding transit, you may start taking your car every day. So we are predicting, many areas in the country are now predicting that traffic will increase as we continue to reopen. At the same time, particularly in our urban areas in this country, we're seeing that our streets may never be the same. A lot of urban areas have closed additional roads, have created additional sidewalk space to facilitate people being able to move while maintaining social distancing in this era. And we think that we know that there's been a lot of positive reaction among the public to these changes. They're getting to experience what roads will be like with more space to walk and bike and fewer cars. And a lot of people are liking what they're seeing. And I'm going to transition to Gladys, and she's going to talk a little bit about a couple of
I think this was a good segue to sharing what's happening to our streetscape during COVID-19. So here's an example in Oakland, where as part of their Slow Streets program, and also because of COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders that they received early in April, they actually went ahead and started to phase in closing some of their city streets to cars. And the reason why they said they started to do this was because they noticed that during COVID-19, there's been an insurgence of folks who want to bike and walk more, and that there was definitely an increased need for more open spaces. They actually have a lack of open spaces. So they decided to close off some of these streets to give people more space to spread out, right? To be able to exercise and walk more freely. And they're actually looking at whether some of these streets can be permanently closed as part of the Slow Streets program. So I think that would be really interesting to see post-COVID-19 how their streetscape may possibly be changing to accommodate for more of this active transportation activity. Here's just another example in Denver, who also did something similar, where they started to close a lot of their streets during COVID-19. And they're also looking at the possibility of keeping them permanently closed. But for now, they're just temporary closures, and there's just more people out there biking and walking, and it's just, and according to the folks in Denver in this article that I've posted here, that people are loving it. There's more people who are actually going out and exercising, which is a great thing. And hopefully we'll see more of that through post-COVID-19 too.
Okay. So moving forward, what are some things that as a company you can think about in terms of transportation as the state starts to reopen? And so we've highlighted a few things. It certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but this is some things that we think that we can do to support commuting in the post shutdown era as we move back into work. The first one being supporting your employees who are going to be using cycling and walking to get to work in a socially distanced way. The second one being implementing alternative and flexible work schedules, and then also continuing to telework part-time or full-time and leaving that option open for your employees. So in terms of supporting cycling, there's a number of things that companies can do to support their employees who wish to cycle to work, ranging from supporting them financially through direct bike benefits, reimbursing bike purchases and repairs. That is unfortunately taxable income. Some of you may know that in the past that there was a bike benefit that was not taxable. Who knows? Please pay attention to this space, because we can always be hopeful that that will come back, particularly as cycling has really risen throughout this pandemic as a mode of transportation and recreation, and bikes are flying off the shelves across the country. So maybe there will be more support for bringing that back as a non-taxable income, but providing bicycle parking, lockers, racks, a storage room, bike fix-it stations, access to showers or lockers traditionally has been something that has been done to support cycling, places to store personal items, and assistance with new bike purchases, as well as providing bikes, loaner bikes at your location, and funding bike share memberships for your employees are all options. If you're in the DC area, Capital Bike Share does have a corporate membership program that you can make available to your employees. And there are a number of benefits both to the employees and to the businesses for encouraging biking and walking. For businesses, you can see reduced healthcare costs as employees are taking an active mode of transportation to work, increasing their health and their wellness. Can also help them reduce their carbon footprint and thereby helping you to meet any corporate sustainability goals that you have. Supporting biking and walking can also be a very popular benefit to offer, particularly in attracting and retaining talent in a competitive environment. For employees who are biking to work, they're seeing that overall increase in health themselves personally. 23% of people in this country do not get enough leisure time physical activity. And so for many people, biking to work is their opportunity to work that into their lives. It also saves them a lot of money. They have more control over their commute time. They're not subject to congestion on the roadway or unplanned issues on transit systems. They control when they leave and when they get to work a lot more easily than those who are using other modes of transportation. And they can also benefit from knowing they're doing their part to help us reduce emissions related to transportation, create cleaner air, and thereby a healthier environment for all Marylanders. Alternative work schedules. What this is allowing folks to work flex time, staggered shifts, or compressed work weeks. So for flex time, allowing people to commute in the off-peak hours. This can both reduce their potential exposure to the virus as well as help employees accommodate other responsibilities they may have at home. Compressed work weeks allow individuals to work a traditional 35 to 40-hour work week in fewer days. So typically they may be working a lot longer, say 10 hours a day, something like that. And this helps actually reduce the number of commuting days, because if they're working 10 hours a day, they're only working Monday through Thursday, see, and then they'll have Friday off. And also that's one less day that they will be commuting and have concerns about potentially being exposed to the virus. And of course, telework. As Gladys mentioned, for the past 20 years, throughout Maryland and the country, we've seen a large increase in the percentage of workers who telework. But this pandemic has provided an opportunity for a far greater share of the workforce to experience what telework is like. And there is a belief that telework will continue at much higher rates than what we've seen in the past, even after businesses are allowed to return to their offices in full. Some of that may be because employees may be concerned about being exposed to the virus, even post staying at home time. It also can be because now they've had a chance to telework and they have found that this is working for the company and for the employee, and they want to be able to continue this style of working into the future. So specifically, what do we need to think about when we're talking about telework after COVID-19? So one important point that I wanted to make is that we have heard from some individuals that telework may not have worked for them or not be working for them during this time. And I think it's really important to think about how telework during this time is different than telework in normal times. This is a picture of me with my youngest child on my lap. And it can tell you, particularly since I've teleworked for many years prior to this, that COVID-19 telework is not really the same thing. It's not at all the same thing as regular telework. There's this additional stress from having this suddenly imposed upon us by a health crisis that's prevalent across the country. But we're also dealing with having to care for our children, having to teach our children, and having other responsibilities around the house. Now we have to make lunch for the children that are home with us, and that's impacting our hours that we're working. And even for employees who may not be experiencing this themselves personally, their coworkers may be experiencing it, and that may be impacting some of their ability to get things done during this time. There's also this complete, loss. Now we have no interpersonal time, in-person interaction, and that I think many people feel personally the loss of that. However, continuing telework has many long-term benefits. It's been shown to enhance recruitment and retention of talent, help increase productivity, achieve corporate sustainability goals through reducing the commuting impact your employees have in terms of transportation emissions, enhancing work-life balance, managing the demand for parking. Parking is a large expense for many employers, and telework is one strategy through which you can reduce your parking demand. You could also potentially reduce your costs associated with having a physical office. So at some companies that were part-time telework pre-pandemic, they may not have had necessarily even assigned offices for individuals. You may be coming into the office on very specific circumstances to collaborate for a specific reason. And during the time that you were in the office, you would check out a desk as opposed to having a desk. And companies that were operating under this model pre-pandemic were able to greatly reduce their costs associated with leasing real estate. Telework's also been shown to reduce absenteeism among employees. And this is just a little bit more detail on some of those metrics that I mentioned that were on the previous slide. 95% of employers report that telework improves employee retention, reducing the turnover rate and saving the company money. And in terms of, what are these actual benefits to being able to reduce our commute-based emissions? It's important to note that 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the country are generated by transportation. So we often, as transportation planners, focus on commute trips and how we can impact those to go to modes of transportation that have lower emissions as a part of our key goal of reducing emissions as a country. And telework has been on the rise for some time. So it's had 173% increase since 2005, and just over 3.5% of the US workforce already works from home half-time or more. And if you look at certainly in certain regions, that number is significantly higher. And we've seen this in the Washington region. So this is from the 2019 State of the Commute Survey. 35% of regional commuters teleworked at least occasionally in 2019, and that's an increase of 13% in 2004. And this was a question that was asked in the second webinar among the participants of that webinar about what their workplace plans are in terms of offering remote work post-COVID-19. Over half of the respondents said that they will offer remote work as an option following this pandemic. Another 35% weren't sure yet. And the question was also asked on the second webinar, post COVID-19, how many days a week would you potentially like to telework? And over half of the respondents reported 3 or more days a week, and about a third of the respondents reported 2 days a week. The long-term telework arrangement, that has been created by COVID-19, I think has the potential to sort of shift many employers' views of telework and really focus on how do we create a telework culture within the organization. And so we think that, after this long period of having to telework, that hopefully there can be some transition in that, telework will be more part of the norm of our working environment rather than the exception or something that is viewed primarily as, something someone may do for some specific reason, or, some type of workplace related requirement, and more as just a normal way of doing business. So from webinar number 1, the question was asked, should employers renew their telework policies and procedures, and whether they had a telework policy already in place. And just over half had a telework policy, so not quite 50-50, but close to it, had a telework policy in place, but almost half did not. So what's just some things to think about as you develop your company's goals around telework in the future? One is to begin compiling lessons learned on what has worked well for you and what's not worked well for you during this COVID-19 remote work period. You also have an idea about what positions might be suited to full-time or part-time telework going forward, and which ones you'd really rather have in the office for one reason or another. And certainly, taking an intentional time to consider how telework impacts camaraderie and your company culture. One thing that we do at Foursquare is we actually have 1 day a week. It's a Tuesday where we're all mandated to be in the office, and we really try very hard not to schedule client meetings on Tuesdays. So we can at least have 1 day where we can all be together as a group and help to build and maintain that sense of collegiality. And Commuter Choice Maryland has many tools to help your company develop a telework policy and review your telework procedures. This guide to telework for employers is on the Commuter Choice Maryland website. In it, you'll find great information about things you should consider about communication and accessibility, work hours, workspace and equipment, and IT security as you continue to work on your telework policy. And so some final thoughts here, and I'll also transition back to Gladys for her final thoughts, are that, telework has benefits. It's been on the rise. We know some things are going to change post COVID-19, and we really hope that telework will be a part of that solution going forward. And we're here to help you at Commuter Choice Maryland.
Thanks, Shayna. Yeah, I totally agree in terms of I think it's been definitely a great experiment of sorts, seeing remote work nationally and probably even internationally. And it will be interesting to see, I think, which businesses will actually adopt remote work more frequently post-COVID-19 who maybe did not offer these options before, because they may be realizing a lot of the benefits hopefully now. So I think that's great news for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So I do have a couple of questions for you. So just to reflect a little bit on some of the examples I brought up earlier, the temporary closure of city streets that we have seen in Denver and Oakland are showing many immediate benefits during COVID-19, such as more recreational space for biking and walking. Do you think that many of these temporary closures will remain post-pandemic? Should more cities also be exploring these alternative streetscapes while there's reduced traffic on our roadways?
I think that, you know, definitely we should take this opportunity as transportation community to work with our communities and think about, what we want the streetscape to look like going forward. This time has provided us with a chance to step back and think about what our streets look like, what they function like. And again, having that extra street space for walking and biking has been quite popular. I think that cities definitely should think about, and similar to Oakland, explore where are the opportunities to create more of these spaces and maintain these spaces post-pandemic, and how that fits into the overall landscape for their transportation system. If there are cities that haven't taken that jump yet to start this opportunity to think about those things, I think now is a great time.
Great. Post-pandemic, how important do you think the role of teleworking will be for businesses here in Maryland or regionally?
I think it's going to continue to be quite key. I think in, as we've seen in the Washington region, just over the past 15 years, there's been a huge increase in the ability to telework among the workforce. And prior to the pandemic, we were expecting that that was going to continue for many years to come. And when we're thinking as transportation planners, working with our land use planner counterparts, we're often working on these really long range plans, which may be to like 2050 or 2060. And in those contexts, we were already asking the questions, how much office space are we going to need to plan for in our communities? And already functioning under this belief that there was going to be a lot less need for commercial office spaces. There would be a lot more remote work, and we might see, people coming together for work in different contexts and different kinds of spaces. So I think that this pandemic has perhaps accelerated that transition, and we'll continue to see a much higher rate of individuals being able to work from home than we saw even in recent years.
I've recently heard that there has been bike shortages since the pandemic, which is a great sign that more people are opting for this healthy option. Do you think that more people will adopt biking to work for some or most of their longer commute once everything goes back to normal, hopefully post-pandemic? Or will it stay mostly recreational?
I think that for the places where it is possible to bike to work, that we will see increased interest. Of course, we know that there's a large segment of the population that's in what we call the interested but concerned category, that they really would like to bike to work, but unfortunately our streets right now are not always set up to safely allow or for people to feel safe really as well, biking to work. And so I do think that we'll also see a rise in people biking to work, and hopefully also we'll be able to focus more on how we accommodate this demand from others who are interested in biking to work, but who would like to see safer facilities and more dedicated cycling facilities in place for them to feel more comfortable to do so.
Very good. Okay, that's all the questions that I have, Shayna. With that, this concludes our webinar series with this bonus session. I hope that many of you who are able to tune in these past couple of weeks have enjoyed yourselves and are able to take away a lot of lessons learned to apply to your own businesses, and hopefully provide you with inspiration moving forward as we work through these difficult times together. So as always, we're always here to help. Commuter Choice Maryland remains available and open during this pandemic virtually. This is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us anytime you have a question. We're always ready to help you. And make sure to follow and like us if you don't already on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I thank you all for your time, and we hope that you stay safe and well. Thank you, Shayna.
Thank you, Gladys.
Great session. Thank you.